There we go. And I'm going to mute you all so that we get a really good recording. And then we're going to get started so that we can begin our new phase. All right, I am going to share my screen, and I'm actually going to go to the beginning of it. And let's get here. And again, welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad that you were willing to stop in and join us on your Thursday night. I am Andrea Miller. I'm the founding board member of Center for Common Ground. We are based in Virginia, and we have a very, very, very simple mission, which the board just expanded. Our mission is to empower underrepresented voters, or basically, I guess we'll restate that, to work with underrepresented voters so that they can basically become empowered. Previous to our board meeting last week, we defined underrepresented voters as community of color voters, Black, Asian, Hispanic, Native American, or Indian. We expanded that definition in our last board meeting to include voters 18 to 24 of all races, because when we look at elected officials throughout this country, they are truly the most underrepresented group, our young people. And we would be thrilled, honored, and delighted to be able to work with them and help them move those numbers as they move into more elected offices. Most of you are part of or have worked with the Reclaim Our Vote campaign. We also have the Vote Equality campaign, and the notorious RVG belongs to the Vote Equality campaign. We also run Let Me Vote, Count My Vote. And then we also have our Democracy Center project. But tonight, it's really going to be about the new direction of where we're going now that our work on big elections is mostly over. Virginia has an election every year. We are never going to be done with elections, but our big elections are mostly over. We are also a technology company, and probably next week, we will be announcing some of our new tech products. So tonight we are going to be talking about civic engagement, education, and empowerment. Basically, that's exactly the other side of our work that we do on democracy. So in democracy, we work to elect people to public and or private office. And then after they get elected, we have to look at what we as a community, federal community, state community, local community, what we need them to do as citizens of that community. And then we need to hold them accountable. Now, just as we did not, when we worked on elections, support candidates or political parties, when we work with legislation, we aren't looking for democratic legislation advanced only by Democrats. And we also reach out to Democrats, Republicans, independents to support good legislation and oppose bad. So just wanted to make sure everybody understood where our mindset was, because we are now going to be working with our government at the federal, state, and local level for some folks, and our issues as they relate to our government. Now, we are going to be using a lot of the tools that we have used before, and we're already very, very comfortable. So, yes, we are going to be doing postcarding, and we'll be postcarding our same voter population, only this time, rather than telling them when elections are, we'll be letting them know when there's an opportunity for them to contact an elected official and weigh in on something that is probably going to get a vote that would be beneficial to them. So we're going to be doing outreach to the same people where pretty much not a lot of folks reached out to them for voting. Even less people are going to reach out to them for civic engagement. And that's going to be very, very important to build a community of civically engaged people who will continue to be engaged in the next election and future elections because they'll understand how the government works. Now, we did phone calling. We're going to be doing a new kind of phone calling. We're going to be doing patch through calls where we'll be calling voters. Um, Probably our first campaign will be in Georgia, and we'll be talking to voters about an issue and then asking them, would they be willing to say something to their elected official? We're going to guide them on what to say. And then when they say yes, we're going to literally patch that call through to the elected official and then let them talk. So that is going to be new. So yeah, we're investing in some new and different technology. Some of you already saw our first email letter campaign that we have done to this particular group, where we were emailing House members asking them to vote yes on impeachment. Well, it will probably very shortly land in the Senate. For the Senate, we may do an email campaign and we may do an automated patch through campaign where people who want to talk to their senators and say, we need you to vote yes on this and convict, well, they're going to be able to use their computer, put in their name and address and their phone number, and then our system will call them back and patch them through directly to their senator. So look for that to be happening. And we're going to be doing a lot of educational webinars because I realized in talking with a lot of our Southern partners that the world that we live in as community of color people in the South, especially in the rural South, is so very different than the world that so many of our volunteers who are urban and who are living in progressive communities, it is so different what you experience along racial, social, economic, and even climate lines. So you're going to be hearing from a lot of my friends. Virginia is still the South. We're going to be going and visiting over the next several weeks and months. We'll be hearing from people in the Deep South. We'll be down in Mississippi and we'll be down in Alabama, and we'll be talking to people who live there about their experiences and what they're going to need to do. Now, what we're going to be looking at, some of you have seen this one before. Um, our legislative priorities are going to constantly be evolving. We are very early in the 117th Congress. Very important thing to know about legislation. Congress has a 2-year cycle. So when they introduce a bill, we basically have 2 years, the length of that congressional cycle, to get that bill through the US House, through the US Senate, onto the president's desk, and the president signs it. If that doesn't occur in the 2-year period, when the next Congress convenes, then we have to introduce that bill all over again. And most of the time, it doesn't have the same number. This first bill that we're supporting does. The For the People Act by John Sarbanes is H.R. 1, House Resolution 1, first bill introduced in the House of Representatives. Now, we have also heard that the Senate version of this bill is going to be S1, the first official bill dropped by the US Senate. We're also going to be supporting the Voting Rights Advancement Act, often referred to as the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. In 2013, when we lost Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, which was the formula that was used to determine, has a state been guilty of voter suppression? And if so, if they want to change their voting rules and voting laws, the Department of Justice must pre-clear that before they're allowed to do that. That bill has not been reintroduced in the 117th Congress. When that bill is reintroduced, I will read it, I'll read the whole thing, and I'll make sure that, yes, it's still the good bill that we expect. And then that bill will get on our list of bills that we support. We support statehood for DC on the general principle that it's a really good idea. And the other reason is based on what we saw on January 6th. If DC had been a state, then some of those problems could have been averted. So I think there will be a lot more support for DC becoming our 51st state. And their representative, Eleanor Holmes Norton, who currently has a seat in the House, but she has no vote that is counted, will now get a vote that is counted. And DC as a state will get 2 more senators. Um, it has not been introduced yet or reintroduced yet, the constitutional right to vote. This is a very, very simple bill that simply says every citizen of the United States of voting age shall have the fundamental right to vote in any public election held in the jurisdiction in which that citizen resides. That begins to codify that certain things are just a right. Remember, the original Constitution made voting a privilege that was only to be enjoyed by rich, land-owning white men. So it's time to redo that amendment and say, whoa, it's you're a US citizen, you're of voting age, hey, you got the right to vote. Um, and then we're going to be working on economic, social, and various racial and climate justice issues as they appear in legislation. We will probably have an email campaign and the patch through phone campaign starting at the beginning of February, if not next week. Georgia, the Georgia legislature plans to introduce a bill limiting vote by mail and possibly, we haven't seen the legislation yet, limiting early voting, saying you can only early vote or you can only vote by mail if you have an approved excuse. So the states are looking at what happened, especially Georgia, and other states are going, wow, we could be next. And they are beginning to introduce bad legislation to ensure that they suppress the vote even more. We're even hearing of bad bills in Connecticut and Oregon. So the For the People Act will be very important for those of us who support voting rights. Now, what have we done so far? Our House impeachment campaign was very, very successful. We have the upcoming Senate impeachment campaign, and the Senate will probably in early February take up for the People Act. And I'm thinking they may take up DC statehood in February. I am not expecting Mark Pocan to have his bill before April. He could surprise me, but I'm thinking it will probably be April. Now, state legislation. We're going to be working starting tomorrow with the Atlanta NAACP on drafting the language around opposing, limiting early voting and vote by mail in Georgia. We just did a campaign in Virginia around Senate campaign finance, prohibiting contributions by public service corporations. The Democrats defeated the Democratic bill. So we've got more work to do in Virginia. And I'm very glad that this is an election year. We may need to frighten some people. And then a bill we expected we would be able to sort of work on building up co-sponsors for was our moratorium on fossil fuels. The Democratic Speaker of the Virginia House refuses to docket the bill. She herself is a paid lobbyist. So that's where we are with our existing campaigns that are either starting immediately or we've started. Now, here is your master's class on S1 HR1 as an organization who has worked very, very hard on voting rights. This is what HR1 has to offer. All states will have no excuse early voting. All states will have no excuse vote by mail. All states will have same-day voter registration. All states will have online voter registration. All states will have automatic voter registration for any voter as young as 16 who will be 18 by election day. And with automatic voter registration, the voter must decline and say, no, don't register me. Otherwise, they will be registered. And it prohibits states from requiring a full Social Security number to register. And that will have a direct impact on Virginia because Virginia requires full social. Now, this is still HR1. HR1S1 includes democracy restoration for federal elections. An estimated 5.2 million people cannot vote due to a past felony conviction, and the majority of these votes are community of color voters. In at least 6 states, Alabama, Florida, Kentucky, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Virginia. That means that more than 5% of the total voting age population is disenfranchised. They can't vote. And so when I pull the list of unregistered voters from NGP Van or any service, because it doesn't tell me why a voter is unregistered, in some instances, we may have people on that list who have a felony conviction and their right to vote has not yet been restored. So what this bill says is that once a person is released from prison and or supervised release, then they may register to vote. So I don't know if most of you remember Amendment 4 when Florida citizens voted to amend their constitution, and they said the 1.5 million returning citizens in Florida who were out of prison um, should now be able to vote. The Florida legislature, when it convened, said, not so fast. You're not going to be able to register to vote until you pay all your fines and all your fees, and then refused to tell people what those fines and those fees were. This S1 HR1 removes that, and it says, no, this is no longer the case. And then in the 4 states, Virginia, Florida, Kentucky, and Iowa, that are lifetime disenfranchisement states for people who have felonies, it says, nope, that's just gone away. I don't care what your constitution says. Once people are out of prison, they're off supervised release, they have the ability to go and register to vote. Now, this is federal elections only, and there's a quote that I pulled straight out of the bill. Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution grants Congress ultimate supervisory power over federal elections, an authority which has repeatedly been upheld by the Supreme Court. So when we do federal law for something like restoration of voting rights, that only applies to federal elections. In most other things, it would apply across the board. So this is only right now for federal elections, with the idea being, whoops, I missed, with the idea being that would states really want to maintain a double list? These are voters who get to vote in all the elections. These are voters who only get to vote in federal elections. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Early voting. Early voting must begin at least 15 days before the election. Early voting times must start before 9 a.m., all those that started at noon, and they must extend after 5 p.m. Um, Josie's going to smile at this one. When we wrote tax percent, one of the things we had to add in was the dates that early voting was available in counties and the times that early voting was available in counties, because the same counties might have early voting locations opening up on different days and operating at different hours. This says, no, you're not going to confuse people as to when they can vote. When it opens up, it stays open, and it's going to be open at least 10 hours every day that it's open. And early voting is available to all eligible voters. So no going back and going, no, we're only going to allow early voting for seniors, people who are disabled, and people who are going to be out of their county. So early voting will now be available across all 50 states. Vote by mail. What Georgia is attempting to do, S1 HR1 would basically outlaw. Vote by mail is available to all eligible voters. And it also says states may not require any identification in order to obtain a ballot. States may not require notarization or a witness signature as a condition of obtaining or casting a ballot, and no limit on the number of ballots a person may deliver or drop off. So again, many of the problems and challenges that we saw in the 2020 election have been addressed in this bill. And this bill is basically an omnibus bill. They're saying, all right, let's gather up all the stuff that's been wrong and we're going to put it all in one bill. This is our big for the people bill. Congressional redistricting. It's as a nonpartisan agency will establish an independent redistricting commission. Or if they can't do that, then a 3-judge court will work on that. Membership on the commission is open to citizens of the state through a publicly available application process. We just went through this in Virginia. So it can't be some weird secret process that they don't tell anybody about. Individuals who are former candidates or elected officials or paid consultants to political campaigns are disqualified from serving on the commission. And again, this is federal law. This is all 50 states. Now, the Save Voters Act. Voters may not be removed from voting rolls for failure to vote in any election or failure to respond to a notice unless the notice is undeliverable by the post office. If they remove a voter from the rolls, the voter must be notified within 48 hours of removal. This is a huge one for me. The official residence of incarcerated individuals is their last known address prior to incarceration. So that means for the next census, if someone is in prison, the rural community where they are imprisoned will not be able to count them in their census and get the money. The money goes back to wherever that person used to live. So that's why when you're in the rural South, you'll be going through these tiny little towns, and the only thing they have is, quote, a prison, but they'll have a brand new community college, a brand new courthouse, and a brand new administration, courtesy of the census money of all the people that are in their prison. They can't vote, but they get to claim the census money. This ends that. And again, when you look at the summary of the bill, they don't go into this detail, which is why it pays. Sit there and read the whole darn bill. Campaign finance, prohibition of involvement of foreign nationals in elections, improve the disclosure who paid for these online political ads. They're expanding the definition of public communication to include digital, paid internet, or satellite. When you put a disclaimer on an ad, it must be clear and it must be conspicuous. So no hiding it and no. We need to know who paid for it. And every online platform must maintain a list of everyone who spent more than $500 a year on political advertisements. Small dollar financing of congressional campaigns. They will be able to get up to 600% of the money that they individually raised, and then their statement on Citizens United. It prohibits artificial entities from spending money to influence elections. And then super PACs and candidate campaigns cannot coordinate. It will establish a lobbying clearinghouse in the Department of Justice. It will have a very strict policy and definition of executive branch conflict of interest. Didn't we need that? And restrictions on receiving private sector payments. A prohibition of procurement officers accepting employment with government contractors, and the president and vice president, within 30 days of assuming office, will divest themselves of all financial interest that pose a conflict of interest. So that is SHR 1. Yay! And now we are going to be offering a lot of upcoming events. We are going to be offering a lot of training. So this is just some of the things that we are working on getting scheduled. Civic engagement training. We will be doing a series. A lot of you probably remember Voting in Troubled Times. The name of it may get adjusted a little bit. I love the Accelerating Justice series, where we'll be able to talk about racial, social, economic, and climate justice. So there'll be other names after that colon. Where for all of our organizers, we're going to be doing Action Network training. One of our first series, I believe this will begin right around the beginning of February 11th, racial equity and criminal justice, led by our fabulous folks in North Carolina. Well, it will be them and a number of other groups working together, talking about that. Reverend Sadler's supposed to be reimagining, not reimaging, reimagining America, and I spelled it right. Truth, reconciliation, and atonement, unwrite our history, and the Youth Poll Worker Project. And this is where we're going. So what I'm going to do is stop the share, and then I am going to allow you to unmute yourselves, and I will entertain questions. Yes, it was my goal to get done with that in 30 minutes, and I did it. Yay!
I have to unmute myself. Okay.
I've got a lot of stuff in chat. All righty. All right, and we will be adding this PowerPoint to the Slack. So this will be there very shortly.
Oh, yeah. And Andrea, I did post it in the chat as well.
I see it. Thank you very much, Nancy. And we've given everybody an invitation to the Slack. Let's have is more monitor notifying voters of mistakes. There is still going to be some additional legislation. There's some tweaks we need in SHR 1, but for omnibus legislation, it is very, very comprehensive. It is quite good. We will also see some of these pieces of it being introduced as a separate piece of legislation. Under what conditions can states use to remove a voter from the rolls? Death or they moved. And that's basically it.
And Andrea, please repeat, somebody was saying, please repeat the question in chat like you just did before you answer it.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Someone did a private message. How do you see this playing out for people in a state like California, where we have a lot of representatives who are already supportive? of these issues?
Well, you're going to have a lot of representatives supportive of it. That's going to be very, very good. It means that potentially you will have time to help us with other states where people are not quite so supportive. You will be surprised when we move on to other legislation like DC statehood that has never gotten all the Democrats on board, but they may be on board this time because of January 6th. Yeah. And can you get my notes on HR1? The PowerPoint will be added to the Slack, and the PowerPoint is available for you to download from the chat. And so that's my information literally taken right out of HR1.
So you're sending all of that to us? I mean, we're going to get all of that in Slack?
Yeah, that will all be in Slack. Yes.
You also will get an email either tonight or tomorrow with a link to the recording, and also an invitation to Slack, and also the detail from the PowerPoint.
Okay, because I do have Slack. And, are you from California, Nancy?
Yes, I am. The San Francisco Bay Area. Yeah.
Oh, I'm in Los Angeles.
Oh,
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah.
You've got great people in LA.
We're in Los
yes.
Angeles. Confirmed.
Great.
West Hollywood.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Hey, that's Southern Cal.
You too, Tom.
Welcome.
Welcome, LA.
Yeah.
Bay Area.
Yes.
Thanks
Yes.
now.
And now, very important thing to remember is, in order to pass the bill in the House, that's 218 votes. HR1 has already passed the House in the 116th Congress. So it will definitely pass the House in the 117th Congress. To pass a bill in the Senate does not require 51 votes on standard legislation. It generally requires 60 votes. There are currently 50 Democrats and independents who tend to vote with the Democrats. And then on the few things that are simple majority, if it's 50-50, the vice president can break the tie. But to move this legislation forward, this says it will be bipartisan. So if any of you live in states where one or both of your senators are Republican, this will give you a tremendous opportunity to engage literally in your own state.
Andrea, there was a private question. Do you anticipate, or private message, do you anticipate problems given that the states are responsible for campaigns with state legislatures deciding voting rules? Yes, we do.
Well, yes, and the federal law will supersede those things. So in other words, since they have to have early voting for federal legislation, for federal elections, are states really going to schedule their state elections on some other day? Elections are expensive.
The only thing I can say is this is what I know. Our new senator, Alex Padilla, was Secretary of State, and he was in charge of all the elections. And I went to an event, you know, like where you hear people speak, whatever, at an event, and he was really incredible. So I think I saw him yesterday on TV because he really wants to get a lot of stuff done. So
Yes. Yes, yes. Well, I'm very excited about Alex Padilla.
yeah, me too.
States to contact their legislators. Yes, yes. So there's a question, if your legislators are good on everything and you have already been able to, it's like, oh, they're good, then yes, you'll have the opportunity to postcard to other states, just like we did with the election, and or phone bank. If we are really coming close to when there's going to be a vote, then definitely we're going to be on the phones. If
Right.
we know we're a ways out, then we'll be able to postcard and give people the opportunity to go, oh, I didn't know that people in DC aren't represented by any senator and their representative doesn't have a vote. What's that? But most people have no idea and haven't really thought about the condition of people who live in our nation's capital if they've never lived there.
True.
Yeah.
I know. I used to live, I was born in New York. So that's my New York, California.
Right,
I've been
right,
very
right.
limited.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, you know the experience of where you live or where you have lived. So something like people in DC don't have senators, they're not a state,
Well, I
they're a
knew that.
city.
just
Right,
from-
right. But people don't think about what that means.
I
It
know.
means,
You're
yeah,
right. Yeah.
yeah, like I said, we saw what it means on January 6th.
Right.
And we were like, well, why doesn't she call out the National Guard? Because she can't.
In fact, their license plate says taxation without
Without
representation.
representation, exactly.
Right.
And Washington, D.C. pays some of the highest taxes in the country, and they have a population larger than 2 states.
Can I ask you, this is like a really weird question. It's not weird, it's just the facts. I happen to, I have an iPad. When I stopped working, I got everybody told me not to get a computer, to get an iPad, okay? So that's what I'm talking to you on.
All
But I
right.
found that during the elections, there were a lot of times where I had problems making calls. And
Yes.
so I almost went out and bought, I mean, I could buy one, okay? And so now I'm thinking that if I feel after all the training that I'm capable of doing, I was a talent agent for 50 years, so I'm still limited. I'm a very limited person. So I just want to make sure that after I do all the trainings, I feel like I can do it. Does that
All
sound
right.
good?
All right.
Okay.
Well,
And then I'll go
let's take
and
a
buy
look.
my computer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Jack asked an important question. He said, what's the advantage of an omnibus bill? The advantage of an omnibus bill is people are lazy. There's nobody lazier than elected officials. They don't even know what's in their right bill. The bills that they introduce, it's not like they've read them. This is something their staff does. So when you put together a big omnibus bill, the odds that somebody is going to sit there and read it all the way through are pretty damn slim. So you can get things into an omnibus bill that you probably wouldn't be able to get into a shorter, it only covers one topic bill, because people are going to be poring over that one topic bill. So I'm working on maybe getting a little minor tweak in HR 1. It'll only be 2 sentences, so most people won't even ever notice that it's there. But it sets us up beautifully for some things that we're going to want to do later.
So Andrea, can you talk a little bit about how we might be working to mobilize the voters? We worked very hard to mobilize for the election for HR 1 and S1.
Well, because there are so many great voting enabling, voter empowering provisions, and these folks have just come through an election, and we know that so many people in Georgia that we talked to said they were going to vote by mail, that when we tell them on the one hand their state government is trying to take it away, so it's important that we do 2 things. number one, oppose the people in your state trying to take it away, but you've got a really important backup. The federal government is establishing standards for voting that all 50 states are going to have to comply with. Mississippi has no online voter registration. They have no early voting, and they only have vote by mail for military. You know, it's like, wait a minute, you're in the US. You're not some third world country here. You know, catch up. We've got standards. So, yeah, I think it's pretty cool. Yes. Now, the important thing to remember about our senators is senators are interesting creatures. Most of them are not really all that progressive. So even periodically, it's going to take some pushing to get the ones with a D behind their name to do the right thing because it's the right thing. So this is going to be a very, very interesting Congress, the 117th. I am looking forward to working with them. One of the other social justice bills that we're going to be working on, I'm not sure when it's going to show up, is I've been working on a constitutional amendment since 2011, 2012, ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment by simply removing the deadline. Well, we easily passed it in the House, but of course, Mitch wasn't about to bring it up in the Senate. So it's going to be very, very interesting. We are looking at doing a, now that he who shall not be named is no longer in office, and I don't mean Voldemort, I mean his American political equal, then theoretically, we may be able to tell the archivist, make the Equal Rights Amendment the 28th Amendment, because he said he would. In the event that doesn't work, we have prepared our arguments. We are suing the archivist. We have also prepared our arguments to go before the Supreme Court. And then another alternative is to go back to our legislation to remove the ratification deadline. So theoretically, we could be working on 2 constitutional amendments in the course of the same year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. And most people are scared to amend the Constitution. Now, what's really great about amending the Constitution is once we get it through the federal level, then 38 states have to ratify. So that means every state becomes a possibility. We are also going to be working with the notion of getting rid of the Electoral College, not by constitutional amendment. I don't think I've got the heart for 3 of them at the same time. But what we would do is at the state level, the National Voter Compact. So probably in February, I will give you the list of the states who still have not voted to be part of the National Voter Compact. That basically says, hey, in my state, our people, we elect the president directly, forget that electoral college nonsense. Once we have states with 270 equivalent votes saying they are part of the National Vote Compact, the electoral college is rendered moot. And I don't have to amend the Constitution.
Okay, going back to the For the People Act,
Yes,
what chances for there being a pass?
very
for
high.
people?
We know it will pass in the House. It's going to be very interesting to see what the Senate does. And now remember, we have 2 years. So it's not like if we don't pass it next month, it's gone. We've got time. So what's going to happen is there will be various organizations whipping the senators, and we will be looking to see what Republican senators sign on or indicate they are willing to vote for this. You know, we're going to give Susan Collins she says a lot of things and then does exactly the opposite. So it'll be like, yeah, right. Yeah, she's half the vote because we never know which way she's really going to go. Again, this will be a very interesting point in history. So will Mitch become filibuster Mitch? What will the Senate do with their filibuster rule? That's just a little too getting into the nitty gritty of the way the Senate works, which is odd. We may also in February have the people's budget. Budgets are moral documents, so it's going to be very, very interesting to see if we have a people's budget. I used to have direct input into it. There's a number of things I'd like to put in it.
Andrea, there's another couple of private questions in chat for the people. One is whether there's any money for counties and so forth to implement some of these provisions.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. None of these will be unfunded mandates.
Okay. The other question was more broad about, since it's a federal legislation, but states run elections, is that going to run into constitutional problems? Are they going to have legal?
No. The Constitution says the Congress controls federal elections. So everything that they do impacts federal elections. Since states hold their elections in conjunction with federal elections, do the states want to separate their elections and move it to some totally separate date so that they don't have to offer early voting or all the other things that come with a federal election?
And then there was another question I think you might have missed in chat from Noel about, could you explain more about the small dollar financing of campaigns and the match of up to 600% of existing contributions? How does that fit in with what's happening now?
Well, right now, there really is no or very little public financing of campaigns. So it would still be, people would opt to campaign that way. I want to take advantage of public financing. So if, say, a regular person were to say, I would like to run for a federal office, and I'm not particularly skilled in fundraising, you could opt for public financing of your campaign. So you would be able to get up to 600% of whatever you raised in public financing.
And then just to let people know, because that was another question, this recording, you can share it with other people because we invited everybody in the world to tonight's talk. So when it goes out in the notes, feel free to share. And the PowerPoint too, Andrea, is that okay to share with people?
Yes,
Okay.
because this is probably going to be one of the better breakdowns of HR1, because most of the ones that I've seen, people are using the summary version. And I'm like, you're missing the really great points of the bill.
Andrea, a few questions came up in the chat about the filibuster. Would you talk a little bit about that?
The filibuster, I can't really talk about the filibuster. I have not paid attention to where they are with that right now. So I'll be able to talk about the filibuster next week. I'll actually go look at where they are and where I think they're going to come down on it. But this week, that was not my focus. We may end up on the filibuster fight. I'm going, ugh. I mean, it's so wonky. I mean, I like a certain level of wonky, but oh boy, are we like in wonk heaven with that.
I got a quick question. You might have already answered it, but I think I was distracted. ADHD. But for the S1 HR1, my concern was, oh yeah, I should say this. Dr. Annette wants me to say this. Dr. Annette and I are both the 2 by-chairs from Hampton Roads Poor People's Campaign, so I can put that plug in.
All right.
We were wondering for them having to notify voters of the stakes for 48 hours. Is there any language in the bill where it has to be electronically or by phone? Because I was thinking, like, I helped work on the Georgia calls, and some people didn't get stuff in the mail, even though they may have sent it, because of the delays. So that's what my concern.
I'd have to really go back and look at what that notification looks like and whether they say they must call them and then mail them or what they say they must do. I was excited about, they actually have to tell people that they took them off the rolls. Again, the big thing for me is they can't just dump you off the rolls because you're not voting as often as some administrator decides and thinks you should vote.
Can you tell us when we might be able to start doing postcarding campaigns and how we would get the information on who to be writing to, get what we need to do that?
You will get the information. We're going to be bringing in a new, more electronic, more automated postcard system. And so when we do that, that's where you would get your addresses, and your distributors can tell you where that will be. And you will also get the script. This is what we're going to say to the voter. So it will be exactly like the campaigns you had done before. It's just, this is going to be asking the voter to do something other than vote. So your labels are probably going to have the name of their elected representative, because nobody knows the name of their elected representative. And then it's going to have their phone number so that they can either write them if they want, so we'll have their name and their address, or we'll have their phone number and then they can just call.
Will this probably start in February or?
Yes, this will start in February. Yes.
Is Slack
So
where we'll find out about campaigns and when they start?
Pardon?
Yeah,
You're going to know when these campaigns start almost as soon as I know when they start, because they just went in session and I'm pulling together what do I think we were going to have time to postcard on versus what's going to be so fast we're going to have to make phone calls because we don't have time to write postcards. And in some campaigns, we'll do both. We'll write postcards and voters will take the good phone numbers that we have and we'll call those voters. Because remember, there's no elections and our voter, pretty much nobody calls them anyway. So we'll be able to call them with some good news. They're actually doing something really good in DC. They want to make sure that, imagine calling the voters in Mississippi. Mississippi will now have early voting and Mississippi will now have vote by mail, and everybody can do that. People in Mississippi aren't even going to believe that such a thing is possible.
How do our group specifically find out about when you're starting the postcarding? Because we're anxiously looking forward to starting on it.
I posted in the chat the list of where you can find your regional coordinator. And Arlene, you're in New York, so it would be Maka.
Okay, that's her.
Our regional organizers know exactly what's going on all the time because they meet with Andrea every week.
Yes. Yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay,
Yes.
fantastic.
So this is very, very, very dynamic. Remember, the Senate just came back on Tuesday. So we are right there. And then I'm a member of most of the national DC tables. And we may be doing, or we will be doing, petitions and letter campaigns. So you should feel free to share those with friends, families, relatives, anybody that you think would be supportive of it, because we're going to need votes from as many states as we can get. 218 in the House, 60 on the Senate side. And then we're gradually going to start teaching civics. So many of the organizations I'm working with in the South, they want our technical training. They want us to train them how to use the digital tools that we have. And then also some communities have asked for civics training. Well, if I'm having this problem, where do I go? Do I go to my congressman? Do I go to my city council? A lot of people think the president has the ability to solve certain problems in their communities, when in most instances, it's your local city council that is going to make those decisions. The president's got nothing to do with it, nor does your member of Congress. But people don't understand how government is supposed to work. So they get discouraged and then say, well, I'm just not going to participate. It doesn't work. And often it kind of does work. You just have to go to the right area of government. And we want to make sure that we can help people stop being Tommy Tuberville and thinking the three branches of the federal government are the House, the Senate, and the president. And this man is a sitting senator. Ouch.
Andrea, there was a question about how the people's budget is developed and by whom.
Well, if we have a people's budget, and I really hope we do, there are a number of budgets that get introduced. The President of the United States has a budget. The Democratic and Republican caucuses have a budget. Every House caucus is entitled to introduce a budget. Normally, the other caucuses that introduce budgets are the Black Caucus and the Progressive Caucus. The Progressive Caucus, upon the request of the People's Budget Campaign, which I chaired, made a request that they always call the Congressional Caucus budget the people's budget, so that we would be able to immediately identify this is the budget that we're asking people to support. They used to give it a new name every year. They were busy being clever. I was like, no, just call it the people's budget, and then we'll know this is the budget we want to support. If they reconvene and decide they are going to introduce a Congressional Progressive Caucus budget this year, I will have input into that budget.
Yeah.
And when we do input into the budget, we are allowed one page and we have to do the federal top dollar. So this is what it's going to cost. This is what it's going to do. This is why it's needed. Boom. And that's it.
I got another question. It may not be related, but Dr. Annette and I are wondering, is there a bill going around for public financing for poor candidates who want to run for office? Because we have a lot of good progressive ones.
No. No. The only bill that is out there is the public financing of campaigns. If you want to run for office, you are going to need to raise some money, period. That's it. That's how it works.
I listed a few organizations in the chat that help with that sort of thing for people who want to run for office? There might be more people could add.
Yeah. Emily's list.
Yeah.
Emily's list is not giving any money to anybody that doesn't already have a lot of money. They do not finance for candidates.
I remember AOC, she was saying when she was running for office the first time, she was like, she's lucky that she was on a rent subsidy in order to run. And
Right.
she was like, what, a bartender or a host? But yeah, like,
Yeah.
I don't know if she can do it in New York City. It'd be great if we could have something else.
She had an easy canvas area because the precincts or the congressional districts in New York are so condensed. They're not like miles and miles and miles. Manhattan is only 5 miles. So, you know, her congressional district is only so big. It's that kind of thing where you can probably walk it in 40 days.
Crap.
Yeah.
Well, in Virginia, especially Virginia Beach, where we have candidates running, it's not going to be like that. It's very spread out. And that's
Right. Well, candidates with no money can do one of two things. Go raise the money. It's not that hard. The other option is go and raise an army of volunteers and then knock on every single door.
We have done that.
People want to raise a lot of money, normally because they want to buy dumb stuff like television ads. You're not going to get elected on television,
You need
but
canvassing.
people think that's what they need to do. It's a waste of campaign dollars.
No, that's true. Like we've always, with the poor candidates who ran for the independents, like and Green Party, they would always run by army of volunteers. We'd knock on doors.
Yeah, but you don't knock on enough doors and there's still a lot of stuff that they don't do. It works out great for like city council races. Yeah. Gets problematic when the races start to get bigger. Doesn't have to, but it normally does.
I'd like to mention some past situations where publicly financed elections did work, and where and California tried at one point, 2010, I think, to join that fray with its Secretary of State office as a pilot for it, and didn't use money, but used, you have to get a certain number of signatures on a petition. So that's not technically a money thing, although money helps to be able to make all those petitions and everything. But Bill Moyers had led a group for a while, or advised a group for a while, that had 7 different examples, some in states, some in cities, where certain offices, Republican and Democratic, luckily, were using it. And there are still quotes from that long ago time, 10 years ago now, 10, 11 maybe, where both parties said, oh, thank heavens, now I can do my job. I don't have to spend 70% of the time raising money. And there's a woman who's fabulous named Ann Ravel, who used to be head of the FEC in California. She was also head of the equivalent of that for a number of years. Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
My alarm. And she is hoping for a role that would be headquartered in the White House, that 200 groups are promoting her for, that would address democracy issues. And what she really means is voting democracy issues. Mm-hmm. And she is somebody who also would have loved to be Secretary of State of California. She is a Californian, because she knows exactly what she'd like to do with that office. But one of her biggest elements is publicly funded elections, but at a far lower spending level than anything these days. So
right. Again, the $800 million spent in the runoff election in Georgia, purely by just Warnock and office and Ossoff, was beyond obscene. That was ridiculous.
Yep.
So yes. Yeah.
There are other models. We need to all promote those.
Right. There are many other models, and it's just having a good plan for reaching out to voters. It doesn't need to cost that much money. So yes, the insurgent candidates in 2017 in Virginia, most of them had 1/20th of the money that their Republican counterparts had, and they beat them anyway. It's not about money. It's about, do you have a message that resonates with voters? Do you get your message to those voters?
And Roy McLennan, as well as Daniel Black,
Right.
both said, oh, those parties were crazy. They were just drowning each other out with those hundreds of millions of television dollars, that the one thing they know to depend on, or think they know to depend on.
Oh
Whereas-
yeah, and there's a note from Gabe that is very true. How you raise your money determines who you will owe your candidacy to, your donors versus your volunteers. So again, in Virginia, the Democrats all voted down, we are not going to allow Dominion to donate to candidates because they all want to go to Dominion, our evil electricity company, and get easy money from Dominion. And then when Dominion says we're planning on ripping off the Virginia ratepayers,
They're like,
let us raise our rates, then they do.
yeah.
So yeah. Any other questions? This is really, really, wait a minute. There was, after the Virginia voter purge, yes. We will be postcarding for the Virginia primary, which is in June, in the middle of February. So yes. I'm waiting for Virginia to purge their voters, and that normally happens in January. Oh, yes. Run for something, emerge and run for something are two of the most different kind of groups you could ever want to meet. Run for something. Run for something is run by, they used to be Rapid Resist, and now they've just changed their name. And they really work on getting people to say they're willing to run for office, and then they provide outreach and technical support. So if you're going to run for office, at least work on a political campaign so that you understand what has to happen to make a campaign successful. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Run for something. Oh, I didn't know. Contest every race. Yeah, there's a lot of people that do that. All right. Oh, yeah, time flew. Wasn't this fun? I mean, I really enjoyed this. Yeah. All right. I'm just scrolling through these really, really fast. Okay, wait a minute. Yes, exactly. Yes. All right, everybody, take care. Watch your emails. Nancy will be sending out notes. You may not get them until tomorrow, until Saturday, or maybe even Monday, but you'll get them, and there will be links. And I love HR1. Like I said, I'm working to get 2 little sentences added to it.
Thanks for letting me have a couple of other days, but I hope to get them out tonight or tomorrow.
All right, you guys are so amazing. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. So inspiring.
Hey, Carol. Hey, Evelyn. Oh, we are going to be seeing some great things from our folks in North Carolina.
Yes.
And
Yes,
Mississippi and Georgia and Alabama. So I forgot to put it on the slide, but one of our programs coming a little bit later in the year will be, I forgot what it's called now, the South Speak Southern something or other, the South, I don't know. But again, voices from the South. Yeah, there we go. Okay,
From the South.
yes. All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye,
wonderful evening.